Of course, the real problem is that we have to do something about it. I mean, I am a father. I have 7 children. I have 11 grandchildren. And I can't sit back and just let this go on with us in some sort of silly tennis match between us and the pro-nuclear scientists who are trying to save the industry from collapse. And all the time the children are getting more and more sick, and they're building up this level of radioactive damage, which will result in them getting sick and dying with cancer, heart disease, whole range of illnesses that were all discovered after Chernobyl. And it's not as if this is something new. We know what's going to happen. We absolutely know what's going to happen. We have looked very closely at the health effects of people who were exposed to these same radionuclides after the Chernobyl accident in the same quantities. Not as many people, I have to say, which is why Fukushima is a worse disaster. So I decided we had to do something, and I was contacted by some people in Japan who said, what can we do? So instead of just moaning about it, we decided to do something. Now, there are actually some things that we can do. The first thing we can do is we can actually measure the radionuclides ourselves, because frankly we do not believe what the Japanese government is coming out with. We don't think that they're right. I mean, I've measured more radioactivity in a car air filter than they are measuring in a child. And the car breathes air in the same way as the child breathes air, so I don't really believe what they're saying. That's the first point. So we need to have independent testing. And secondly, we need to try and do something about these children who are being contaminated. There are 2 things we can do. The first thing is we can take them away from the areas of contamination and put them somewhere where it's reasonably safe. But that leads us to another problem, because what's happening now, as I'm told, is that the Japanese government are trucking radioactive material from the Fukushima disaster area, where it's contaminated, all over Japan. And even as far south as the south of Japan, we're now getting reports of radioactive material being taken all the way to the south of Japan to be burnt. Now, what possible reason could there be for burning it as far away as that? I'll tell you the reason. It's really quite sinister and horrifying. The reason is this, that eventually when these children start to die from leukemia, from other cancers, from heart disease, from whatever, their parents are going to want to go into court. They're going to want to sue the Japanese government, and they're going to want to have to say, in order to do that, these children were contaminated, and that's why they've got high levels of cancer. But of course, the only way that they can say that they've got high levels of cancer is to have a control group in an area that's not contaminated. For example, the south of Japan. So I believe that the project to take this material and burn it all over Japan is to destroy all of Japan. Is to increase the cancer rate in the whole of Japan, so that there will be no control group to which you can compare these children in the Fukushima area. So that's that point.
Literally making it up as they go along. We're in totally uncharted territories. You get any nuclear engineering book, look at the last chapter, and this scenario is not contained in the last chapter of any nuclear engineering textbook on the planet Earth. So they're making it up as they go along, and we are the guinea pigs for this science experiment that's taking place.
That radiation has been leaking into the water and polluting the fish continuously for the last 2 years.
放射能メイド持って買って釣ってるってどうなんの俺らが分かってんだよ罪の意識になるの作ってなって自分は食わねえけど人の人に食わせてんの
The problem is not really under control.
It will not be under control for, it's estimated, between 40 and 100 years from now.
We were told 3 partial meltdowns, don't worry about it. Now we know it was 100% core melt in all 3 reactors.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German Marine Research Institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
We were getting fallout coming down in rain in the United States, not in insignificant quantities. And also, of course, the seafood, not only does the ocean's currents bring the radioactivity this way, but also the sea life itself, the bluefin tuna, migrated from Japan to North America and carried the radioactive cesium in its flesh over here.
Wow.
not a good time to be eating tuna.
The fuel core of Unit 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. More than 1,500 fuel rods sit in a damaged storage pool 30 metres above ground.
Yeah, the amount of radioactivity in the rods themselves is about 14,000 times that of the Hiroshima bomb.
Approximately 300 tons of water was filtering through the site until early this month, becoming laced with radioactive materials and then seeping into the sea. Another factor is the ever-increasing amount of water accumulating inside damaged infrastructure. Once it makes its way into reactor buildings, it mixes with radioactive isotopes. For months, TEPCO workers have been pumping up 400 tons of water every day and storing it in tanks on site.
There's 1,060 tanks, stainless steel water tanks, that are holding the water which they keep pumping into the damaged reactors and the spent fuel storage pools.
From the air, the scale of the problems at Fukushima become clear. The growing mass of storage tanks now dwarfs the plant itself. More than 1 million tons of highly radioactive water is now stored here.
But the tanks have been hastily built.
They're made of steel plates, bolted together, rather than welded. Last week, workers detected a major leak in one of those tanks. About 300 tons of water escaped, releasing several quadrillion becquerels of radioactive particles.
Experts have often pointed out how vulnerable they are to damage.
The tanks, though, have been put together very quickly. There's no guarantee they'll last. Their seals are made of rubber, and the joints and bolts are corroding, and they may last not more than 5 years.
So the tank farm has grown dramatically, and it's on the hill. Of course, the problem is, because it's on the hill, the water flows down, and if there's an earthquake, all of these pipes are held together with plastic piping, not much different than what you've got on a swimming pool. So the plastic pipe will snap, and that water will just run right down that roadway directly into the ocean.
They need to remove those fuel rods from the pool, because if there's another earthquake, Building 4 would go down probably, and all those fuel rods would be exposed to the air and they would burn, and they would release 10 times more radiation or cesium than was released at Chernobyl. Huge amounts, and pollute much of Japan and the Northern Hemisphere. So we're in a nuclear crisis at the moment.
If there's another earthquake and Building 4 collapses, which contains the cooling pool with fresh fuel, I'm going to evacuate my family from Boston.
So they've put a crane on top of that building, which is shaky anyway, and they're going to lift the fuel assemblies out one by one with the crane, and it will be done manually. Normally, those rods are removed by computer control with millimetres to spare. It's a very delicate operation.
The fuel rods must be kept submerged and must not touch each other or break. Nuclear experts warn any mishaps could cause an explosion many times worse than that one here in March 2011.
Because if several rods touch each other, you could reach criticality, and the whole fuel pool could go critical.